Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 44th episode of the Anatad Podcast. Today is Friday, July 24th in the United States, Saturday, July 25th if you are in most parts of the world. And I'm joined today by Warren and Marco. My name is Nimmer. I am here in California where it was very nice today, about 72, 73 and probably Celsius about 22, 23, somewhere around there. It's very, very lovely weather. And we already have a comment from Austin. It says, "Come fast." Actually, he sent us two comments. And we have one from Gary, says he's waiting for the podcast. Hello, Warren. Hello, everybody else who's joining us live. And hello, Marco.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm here in the state of Washington. And like Nimmer, we have a great weather today. Marco, how about you?
Well, hello, listeners, and hello to you too. I'm in Melbourne, Victoria, in Australia, and a pretty cloudy day today. I wouldn't say it's warm. It's definitely not warm, probably in the 40s,
See,
but
I would
pleasant
enjoy
enough.
that. I wish it was that here. But anyway.
So I
Ice,
would rather
ice
have your
fishing.
weather. Thank you very much, Nima. But look, I'm more than happy to live in Oz at this point in time. Yeah.
Well,
We'll
Oh
if
my
leave
you're
that
gosh.
one where it is.
if you are looking at this podcast, you will note that we have a new background, um, which is good. So hopefully, if you like it, let us know what you think of that new logo for the Anatad Podcast. It should also show up in most of the podcast clients if you're looking at that. So, what we have today in store? We've got Austin says, let's start the party. Yes, let's do that. What do we have in store today? We're going to talk a little bit about some things in the news. We've got a good amount of news this week, so that'll be good.
Certainly do. Plenty up there.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a little bit about phone optimization. So, what does that mean? It means, what do you need to do to keep your phone optimized? What apps do you use? How do you tell if your battery's in pretty good condition? That whole thing. We'll talk a little bit about security apps, whether or not you need security apps, which ones should you install, things like that. We might throw in a couple of tips in there. We'll see. We also have a couple of listener emails this week, so we'll discuss that. And so it seems like a pretty jam packed episode this week. Oh, I have an app that we need to discuss as well. And so we're going to do an app review of an app called Right Here. All
And
right.
then I'll be sharing a little tip, something that some of us are familiar with and someone may not be familiar with. So a very short little tip for
Yep.
Oh,
the
that's
week.
keeping us all in suspense there, Warren. I like it. I
All
like it.
right. So if you are listening to us live, we definitely thank you for doing that. If you're looking for visuals, you're not going to get much great visuals, unfortunately, because we some of us don't have cameras, some of us don't have good lighting, and so please sit back, enjoy the podcast, get your popcorn, get your beer, whatever it is that you enjoy. It looks like we have four listeners. Thank you so much. Please drop in comments with any suggestions that you have or any questions as we go along. We'll try to stop and read those. And all right, let's go ahead and get started. What's new in the news?
What's news this week, Nimmer? Kick it off, my man.
Well, how about I talk about some security stuff, or maybe like a little war between China and Nokia, or something like that. And since that is going to be something that I put on my home screen, I might as well kill two birds with a single stone throw. In other words, it's going to be also my little tip of the week. So I put this little story on my home screen. Um,
So
so,
let's turn up that volume of that phone and maybe slow down that German a little bit.
so that German, doggone it, Nimmer. Is that too fast, guys? I think
No, I
that's
think
okay.
that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah. Um, so what what I did was actually I created a shortcut to this web page and put it on my home screen. My home screen. So what I'm not gonna do it now, but I'm gonna show you that after I let this thing get read. Read this page.
Okay. From Android headlines, China might retaliate against Nokia, Ericsson if EU bans Huawei. By Sagar Naresh.
To recall, Britain has already left the EU earlier this year. And now it has ordered its telecom operators to remove all the gears made by Huawei from their 5G networks by 2027. The UK has also ordered all its wireless carriers to stop buying any 5G equipment from Huawei by the end of 2020. As of now, the EU has imposed no restrictions on using Huawei's equipment on its 5G networks. However, it has taken a soft step by issuing a security standard. Member states should follow the standards while choosing suppliers to build 5G networks. Note that the security standards by the EU did not name Huawei specifically. However, it gives the states the power to limit Huawei's presence in their networks. A detailed report on how the 27 member states have implemented these standards is expected to be published soon. Beijing's retaliation would be a step in the worst-case scenario. The Commerce Ministry of China has stated that it will take all the measures to safeguard the rights of Chinese companies. This statement comes after the ban by the UK government. 5G cellular network will be almost 100 times faster than the current 4G network. This will be highly beneficial for future technologies in various sectors. As tempting as it may sound for China, it will not such a harsh step until the situation arises. Note that China is already facing the wrath of major economies of the world for the spread of COVID-19. Jim McGregor, the Greater China chairman of consulting firm APCO Worldwide, said that the action could backfire China. The reason is simple, as these foreign tech companies have the liberty of moving out of China. Besides, the manufacturing plants of Nokia and Ericsson in China gives employment to thousands of people. If we go by a person familiar with this matter, Nokia has already started reviewing contingency plans to shift global production. These steps are taken to dodge the restrictions if imposed by China. And any negative step can cause a huge impact on China itself. Sagar Naresh.
That's that a piece of that news. And like I was saying earlier, so what I did was I actually created a shortcut to that page on my home screen, and that is going to be my tip of the week. And so I'm going to open up Chrome and just go to a different web page. Or for instance, I'm going to use maybe Freedom Scientific. Open freedomscientific.com.
Opening web page.
Okay, I'm going to choose
Use a different app.
what
Use a different app. Open with Chrome.
app to open with. So I'm going to choose Chrome here.
0% progress bar.
And just
Home
once.
button. 70%. 80%. Freedom Scientific high quality video magnifiers.
So what I was talking about, for instance, if I wanted to create a little shortcut to this homepage that I can. Sorry, guys. I should get something going here in a little bit. Sorry, I got a call, guys. I'm sorry.
We have a new user on the podcast.
Okay, so you tap on more options in Chrome, and then you go down
Translate.
and
Share.
you,
Find the page. Add to home screen.
where you find add to home screen,
Call from Julia Wallace.
and when you
Mobile plus 1509.
gosh, I keep getting a call, guys.
COVID-19 update. Link.
Uh,
More options. Button.
Nima, could you just do your news? I could just bring this,
Translate. Share. Find add to home screen. Settings.
Okay,
Add to home screen.
add to home
Add to home
screen.
Check it.
Marco, you have a lot of work to edit this thing
Error
out.
authentication failed.
So go to add to home screen,
Add. Button.
and there's either manual or automatic. And if you choose automatic, then you have it right there, or you can just drag it and
Add. Button.
and just put it.
Add to home screen. Touch and hold to place manually.
Okay, so now I'm just gonna say, hey, add it
Freedom Scientific high quality. Cancel. Button. Add
automatically.
automatically. Button.
Okay,
More options.
now that I've tapped on add
Home screen
automatically, it's now on my home screen.
Arizona screen recorder.
So if I go down,
Freedom Scientific high quality video magnifiers.
There it is. So if I tap on that, it takes me to the web page of the Freedom Scientific homepage. And that will be how you add something that you find interesting, most especially an article that you want to go back to later on. You could do that. And then, of course, you can long press on it and remove it when you are done. That
It's
would
quite a
be
good
that
little
tip
tip,
of the
actually,
week.
Warren, because you could essentially set up a page on your phone if you wanted to with all those. Well, I suppose you call them widgets, wouldn't you? Are they widgets?
No, this is a little bit
No.
different than a widget. This is just a homepage, so
Yeah,
a web
like a
So
page.
web
they're
page.
basically icons that
Yeah, they're
obviously
just
pop up
icons
on
to
the
web
screen.
pages.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that makes sense, if you really want to have an article there like that one I read, I just added that to my home screen earlier on and just tapped on that, brought it on and asked the assistant
Well,
to
it's a
read it.
different way of having something displayed, I guess. I mean, obviously you can put it in your favorites tab on your browser, of course, but yeah, probably quicker and easier if you just want to get access to it from a home screen. So,
Yeah. So that's a little
Yeah,
tip
good
of
idea.
the week.
All right, so I guess I'll share a little bit of news in terms of, we talked a little bit about 5G last week. There's a U.S. carrier that has announced a bunch of new 5G sites now live, and to the point where they're now saying they have nationwide 5G. Now, I don't understand how it can be nationwide because they're claiming that they have a population covered of 205 million. The U.S. has a population of over 350
I was
million.
going to say,
but
has your population gone down since COVID-19? That much?
But if you are using the AT&T network, they are now saying that they have nationwide low band 5G. Now, if you try to use this 5G, you're going to maybe notice a little bit of improvement and possibly not, seeing as some of the speeds on LTE you can get up to 2, 3, 400 megabits per second or even higher in some cases. So I don't know that you're really going to notice a big improvement, but hey, if you have a 5G phone, you're now going to see a 5G icon. So congratulations. And this, of course, joins T-Mobile, which also has similar low band 5G.
So
Again,
low band
covering.
5... Sorry, Neiman, low band 5G, that means not millimeter wave, obviously. What band is it? Do you know? Or?
No, so AT&T is using band 5, 850 megahertz.
Oh, okay, so just the... Yep. Sorry.
T-Mobile is using band 71. That is their 600 megahertz. They're over time going to add in more bands. AT&T, for example, is adding in something called dynamic spectrum sharing, which means they can use all the spectrum they own, configure it both for 4G and for 5G, and it will automatically switch depending on the users are on the tower at any one time. So they're adding that in as well. So at some point it'll get a little bit better, but right now, yeah, it's basically the band 5, 850 megahertz, which if you don't know what that means, it means it's going to go far and it's not going to give you very much speed, especially because they haven't dedicated a lot of spectrum to it. So it's like 5 to 10 megahertz of spectrum, which is not very much at all, but it's, again, it gives you a 5G icon, so congratulations.
And on that good news, though, how about T-Mobile is going to stop the, VoLTE. If your phone doesn't support VoLTE and you're having like a 2G or 3G phone, it's
Yeah.
time to start looking for a new phone, huh?
Now, most phones within the past 4 or 5 years, or even later, even really have had voice over LTE since probably about 2014, 2015, somewhere around there. So, this really affects you though if you got a phone from China,
Yeah.
or
Huawei,
one of those,
especially.
Huawei or something, or if you got a phone that is not supporting voice over LTE. It will affect you if you're bringing in a phone from another network, possibly, if that phone doesn't support voice over LTE. But most of the recent phones in recent times should work. Now, it's interesting. AT&T also sent out an email that basically told customers, hey, you're going to have to update your phones because because they're going to stop working or something like that. And so T-Mobile kind of followed them. But AT&T
Yeah.
did this first.
Yeah.
Well, Verizon did this
Yeah.
last year, but AT&T kind of did this now, and they're like, we're going to kill off any 2G, 3G. So, yeah, you need to get a new phone. But they're not really offering any incentives for people to do that other than just saying, hey, your phone's not going to work anymore. So,
Well, I was just about to ask you, Newman, what is the incentive there?
I think they're
well,
just going to try to sell you a new phone and
Well,
yeah,
really,
yeah.
yeah, that's their incentive.
Exactly. It would be nice though if they had some kind of a promotion that says, "Hey, we'll give you this phone for half off or this
and I
amount." Or,
think they might.
No,
Yeah,
they're
they
not
might
doing
announce
that.
something later, but who
Ah,
knows?
that's
Yeah, they might
bad.
add it later, but they're not
That's
doing
really
that right
bad.
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they have promotions going on all the time, but they're not doing anything special for those users. So.
No.
But if you have an older phone, iPhone 5S, for example, it's time to put that phone away, or a Galaxy S2. Time to put that phone away, guys.
Yeah. Well, that phone, how old is that phone? That'd have to be, oh, man.
Any phone within about 4 or 5 years should work. Any phone from
Yeah.
probably before
I think even
2014.
2013, as far back as 2013, like the HTC M7 or
Yeah, a lot of
something like
phones
that,
didn't
those
start
would
to have
work.
it till probably 2014, 2015. Some phones started to have it a little earlier, but yeah. Anyway, it doesn't matter. If you have a phone from that long ago, it's really time to upgrade anyway, even if they didn't tell you that. So,
I'm actually astounded. If you've got a phone from back then, well, if it's still working, well done. You've really
Yes.
got a lot out of that phone.
Yes, exactly.
Sheesh.
Yeah. The ones I'm worried about though are a lot of the ones that you get unlocked because that's one of the things that was a benefit of T-Mobile and AT&T was that you could because they're using similar bands that the rest of the world is using, you could get a phone from let's say Germany or China or Australia and it hopefully should work as long as the correct bands are supported. The problem is now that if it does not support voice over LTE on band 12 for T-Mobile, for example, you're out of luck. Sorry, it's not going to work anymore.
Well, I know for a fact that with some of the older phones here in Oz, even the 800 bands and all that, they're pretty hard to get supported. I think they were one
Yeah.
of the last ones over here to be supported. So if you've got a phone that's that old and it came from sort of this region, you might be struggling. In fact, I'd be very surprised if you could use it over there.
Yeah.
So, and plus, not only that, I mean, obviously the security updates would not be happening for, well, unless you rooted your phone, of course. But
Yeah, there was a person actually on the Anatad list was talking about a Galaxy S7 even, and that phone started
Yeah.
going out, and the screen is going out, and all that. And
well, to be honest, I'm not
I think by the
surprised.
time it's been about 4 years since the S7's been released. I think it's time for a new device. Unfortunately, whether you like it or not, it's just these things have a limited life. So
They do, and I think that sometimes maybe something happens to the digitizer or something, and
Yeah.
it's just not
now a lot of
responding.
the times you can get that stuff, and sometimes people do this. They go to a shop and you can get that stuff replaced relatively cheaply. You can get parts to do it, or if you have the technical skill, you can do it yourself. But again, how long do you really want to keep an old phone going, and how much money do you want to invest into an old phone that isn't even worth all that much in the first place? So
Well,
Yeah,
especially
it's,
over
it's like
here,
a
I
little
mean, we have
sweetheart.
the well, especially over here, we have the ability these days, in a lot of cases, that you can buy a phone and pay it off over 2 years. You don't even have to go on a contract here. They will put you automatically on a 2-year plan, and you can pay that phone. So let's say the phone in American dollars is $900. You've got 2 years to pay that off, which I think is more than reasonable. And the phone is unlocked. So
well, some of the carriers
You know.
now they're doing they're all doing the same thing, but some of them are doing 36 months.
Yeah,
And that's a really long time to be locked into a device, especially since, as
absolutely.
you've said, yours are unlocked. The ones here, unfortunately, are not unlocked. They
Yeah.
will not be unlocked until you pay it off. So, unfortunately, U.S. carriers are, frankly, not doing the consumers much good, which is a shame. It is a big shame. They need to change that. But hey, it is what it is.
yeah.
Exactly. Look, you
It's
can
a
only
sad
deal with
fact.
what you've got and where you live, and I completely concur. Though, Nimmer, if you've had your phone for 4 years, it doesn't matter what platform you're on, whether you're on iPhone or whatever. You really need to start looking at updating at some point fairly
Yeah.
soon.
I agree. Gary, well, Austin says he's drinking rum. Gary asks, what are the VOLTE bands? And like I said, usually like band 12. Usually it's whatever the carrier is using, it's their lower band because they want to make sure that you always have that coverage. So Verizon, it's band 13, 700 megahertz. T-Mobile is band 12, 700 megahertz. I want to say AT&T is the same, band 12.
Well, that's one of the
So,
most common bands, so you have to, keep that band because it has the most coverage, as you said. You can get out the furthest on those bands, so,
yeah.
yeah. Other news this week, Nimmer, of course, I believe that the OnePlus had their announcement. I think it was
Oh,
yesterday or the day
goodness,
before, wasn't it?
yes.
I think it was a
Yeah.
couple
Oh,
of days ago.
Marco, he has to bring the OnePlus
Well, you
thing.
have to bring it up because it was part of the week's
Yes.
news. It's not. There's nothing about it. It's part of the week's news.
Yes, the new OnePlus Nord is released. It is not
We
here
have
in
to
the
talk about it.
not here in
Oh,
the
yes, we
States
do.
yet.
And it won't be
Possible
for a
it
while
may
from
be,
what I
will,
read.
but for a while it may not come. It may never come. Who knows?
Well,
It seems like a pretty nice device.
The other part of that news that I did hear, Nimmer, is that they will potentially bring a version of the One Nord out, but it probably won't be the one that's released at the moment.
No,
It might
probably
differ
not.
slightly.
Yeah, but
It
that's
seems like a pretty
interesting.
nice phone, though. It looks like it has
Yeah.
really good specs. Mid-level specs, I would say, not really good specs. It has exactly what we discussed before. The specs, of course, all leaked, so there's not really much that we were surprised about.
Well, the only thing to
Um,
keep in mind is that when you look at the price of the phones, and this we actually did make a slight error last week. If you look at the price of the phones, they're actually saying €400, so that's a little bit different from $400. I think we
Yes,
actually
the prices
said that
are
it
a
was
bit
going to
lower.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
prices
so-
are a little bit. But
Well, if it's €400, it's more US. It'll be what, 500 US potentially.
now just maybe a little over 400. It's not pounds though.
Yeah.
If it's 400 plus
Well, you can
pounds, then
almost
it's gonna be
guarantee that if
500.
they do bring the phone out to the US, it's going to be more because
Oh,
if you
they'll
look at the
increase the
previous
price,
set of,
sure.
Yeah.
of One Pluses, they were at least another 100 or 200 more than what you could get them in India.
Yeah.
So
Then the 64 gig is particular to the Indian market. So in India, you got the
Yeah.
three choices all the way to 56. But
And
then
this
you
really
got-
frustrates me about carriers in the U.S. market is why do you think that the U.S. population doesn't want to pay $300 for a
Oh, we
phone or
make too
400
much
for a phone?
moolah. So
It bothers me quite a bit. There's a lot of low-income people in this country who would very, very much benefit, or just people who don't want to spend that much money on a
That is
phone,
true.
who
That's
would
true.
benefit from that. It's not a phone I would buy.
No.
But it certainly is, it's a phone that I think that could be good for a lot of people. And I don't understand why these companies decide, hey, your market, you guys make too much, too bad, we're not going to sell. And I know they know people will pay that much, but it's really
well,
unfortunate.
this happens a lot in the US, not just with OnePlus, but with a lot
Yeah.
of phones
Yeah,
that come out
that
from
is
various
true.
companies, usually from the Asian market. You guys tend not to get a lot of these, what I would
No,
call
we don't.
mid-ranges go out, which is like we get them here predominantly.
Yeah.
Most of them will come out here fairly quickly, actually. I wouldn't be surprised if Australia got the OnePlus Nord fairly
Yeah.
soon. But in the US, you just, for whatever reason, you either have Motorola that comes out, which obviously they have their mid-ranges, which are quite good.
Well, I would
or
think
you have,
those are
or you have
like
the
low
expensive
end, though.
stuff. But
Yeah,
they're
we
probably
either
more
get
low-end,
really
that's
low
right,
end.
Yeah.
We either get low end garbage,
Yeah.
or we get really high end,
for
top
like
dollar
Boost
stuff.
Mobile, Boost
Yeah.
Mobile,
Exactly.
or Metro PCS or something.
Yeah, we'll
stupid
get
like
low end
that.
garbage, or we'll get really high end stuff. But there's not very much
Well,
that
the
comes
only
out that
mid-range
is
stuff that you're going to get is probably the 4A or the 3A, like the Pixel line. That's about the
Yeah,
only
we got
mid-range
that. We
sort
got
of
the
stuff that you guys
iPhone.
get.
Well, we've got
Yeah.
the A71, some of the A series or whatever it
Yeah.
is. So we got
Samsung's
the
starting to bring those in here.
LG Velvet.
Yeah.
But
for
those are
600
starting to
bucks.
be, yeah. I mean, $600 is still
Yeah,
a
but
lot
you're
of
already
money.
getting up there. You're already
Yeah, you're getting
there
up
with that
there.
one.
I mean, there are mid-range specs, but you're getting up there in price. So
Yeah, that's
I
too
don't know.
much. Too much. That's too much.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you're interested in the OnePlus Nord around the world, and if you get one, please let us know what you think of it. Certainly not a phone I'm going to buy, but it seems like a pretty nice device. Looks
Well, I know that we
interesting.
do get quite a few people listening from the subcontinent, so if you do actually, or you are able to even perhaps demo a OnePlus Nord,
I'm holding
If you're able to
Austin
get
to
your
that.
hands on it,
He
send
has to
something
do it,
in.
or a cash. One of those boys. You guys have to do that. And this is an interesting thing. I saw some news already about the OnePlus 8T, so coming out in September or something like that. Just imagine that. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Gary says we need some of those lower priced phones in the U.S. Yeah, I agree, Gary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm there
definitely
with you, my
agree.
man. I'm there.
Yeah. I guess the other-
Okay. Yep.
Sorry, I was going to say another piece of news that came out of the week, of course, further on from what we discussed last week, re the Samsung get together, I guess you could put it, coming up on the 5th of August, would be essentially that well, from what they've leaked out so far, they're going to be announcing 5 different phones slash, well, I guess you could call the Z a kind of a phone tablet, foldy thing.
Yeah, it's that Z Flip. Yep.
Correct. So they're going to announce the 2 notes that are coming out, the Ultra and the ordinary 20. They're going to announce the Z phone, from what we believe. They might touch on the next potential Samsung phone early next year. And also, they might well touch on the watch. I believe they're up to the 3 on that one, are they, Nimmer? I think they're up to the...
Samsung just
Double check
releases way too many things, personally.
Yeah.
And I think they're putting out 5 phones that people just can't afford right now.
Well, I
So
seriously
you're
think
putting out a
that's big
$2,000 phone.
show. Yeah.
Do you really
That-
think
that
somebody...
That thing's going to have to go for a few hours because that's a lot of stuff to bring out on one day. That's just
It's going to be
crazy.
it's going to be a big show. But I mean, I'm thinking about the
Absolutely.
pricing of these phones, and I know some people will buy them, but I don't know what their goal is. The Galaxy S20 Ultra did not sell as well as they.
Well, no, and also
People said they
looking at the
wanted
news-
it, but they didn't sell them.
Yeah, and also looking at the new Z brand, I think one of them's going to be $2,000 American, and one of
$2,000.
them's 1,400 or something, I believe, the 5G
Yep.
version, which is just
Well, all the notes
craziness.
are going to be around that price too. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just an outrageous price.
Somehow, though, it sounds like the Note is going to be like a little bit the same price like the Note 10, or maybe just $100 more if you're getting the biggest one. So I think Samsung's.
I
kinda
think you're
learning
right,
something.
actually, Warren. I think predominantly the price is going to be about the same. But
Yeah.
I think
Well, it
what
doesn't
they'll
matter if
probably-
it's the same; it's still very high.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Well,
and
but we've
I
crossed
honestly,
that. We've crossed that bridge, Nimmer.
I look,
and
I love flip phones. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not paying $2,000 for one. Not $2,000 American, which is what about.
I don't want. I don't want a flip
2800
phone. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's.
Well,
crazy.
see, I would love to have a flip phone, but yeah, I'm the same boat. There's no sense, and the one that came out last year just wasn't any good. So
No.
it's
Was no bueno.
Well, they have to. Well, apparently they're doing more work on it, but who knows? I mean, people. They claim that they shipped out 3 million of them, so there must be some deep pockets out there somewhere. So.
Oh, yeah,
come to
people always
India.
buy
You
it.
will get you will get OnePlus, Xiaomi.
Send me one, my man. One of those just to play with.
Realme,
Yeah,
Samsung, M
be honest,
series, all
I'm
these.
not
Yeah,
really-
that's really good, Austin.
Yeah, Austin, those phones just aren't convincing me to come out. Just like if you cook me a nice dinner or something, that would be more convincing.
Thank you,
Just
my
saying.
man.
Yeah, I mean, I personally wouldn't buy those phones, but I'm not saying that we. I still say we need those phones here.
Oh, absolutely.
I
We need
guess they're not
competition
phones
in
I
the
would buy,
mid-range
but
market.
I would love
Yeah.
to see those phones here.
Well, go have it as a secondary phone or something like that.
No, but you
it would
just
be
need
nice.
competition. The only way that you're going to potentially drive prices down anywhere is to have competition. Now, if there's no competition in the mid-range market, you're either going to have, which is what the US has, like Nimmer said earlier, you're going to have low-price phones or extreme budget, or you're going to have ridiculously expensive.
That's all we
devices.
got.
That's all you're going to get. So
Okay, let's see here. How many people do we have listening, guys?
I don't know.
We have 4 people listening. Thank you guys for listening. If you are joining us for the first time, please like, share, and subscribe. Share this out with everyone. And we're going to start talking about optimizing your phone. By the way, before you move on, if you haven't noticed, last week we added chapter markers to the podcast. So if you're using a podcast client that supports that, or if you check us out at anatadpodcast.com, you can now skip to your favorite section. So please let us know if you think that's helpful or useful, or if there's anything else you'd like to see as well.
Oh, I personally think chapter markers are a great idea.
Yep.
It's fantastic. It allows people to,
They're
to go
perfect.
to your favorite
They're
part
good.
if you wish.
Yeah.
But you should really be listening to the whole show. We're not encouraging you to skip over.
No, don't skip over it, please. I hear you.
All right, so optimizing one's phone. There's many apps of this ilk out there. I know there are. CCleaner would be one. 3-in-1 toolbox, which is my personal favourite, Nimo, and I believe is probably yours as well. That's a good one.
Yeah, so I'm going to spin this in a one direction, and then we'll talk a little bit
Yeah, and then
about
we'll
the apps. So
go off it. Yeah.
I think what's some things that are really important to talk about. What do you need to do to optimize your phone, and what shouldn't you do to optimize your phone? And then we could talk a little bit about how to do those things. But one of the things that sometimes people do is they tend to close down a lot of the apps. They tend to go to the recent apps and hit close all or just dismiss a bunch of apps. Especially I've noticed this a lot in iOS land. I'm not saying that only happens in iOS. Please don't think that, but I have noticed that. And people just seem to think that you have to go to the recent apps and just kill off all these apps. And the thing is,
Yeah.
the operating system does a really decent job of managing that. And you don't want to do that. And the reason you don't want to do that is if you close out a bunch of these apps, actually going to take more battery power. You can use up more data just to
Open
reopen
up
them
the
later.
app. Yep.
I
Exactly.
actually look at it like in the context of a car, for example. Now, if you're driving along in a car and you're in traffic, if you turn that engine off every
And
time you'll
restart
stop
it.
for a minute or two and then start it up again, you're actually going to use more fuel to do that. It's exactly the same for a mobile.
And you'll wear it out and everything
And
else.
you'll wear it out, correct. Yep.
Because one thing with solid state storage is it has an infinite number of times that you can write to it. And that's another thing too. So, yeah, I don't recommend you close out your apps. I mean, unless your phone is just getting really sluggish, crazy, or anything. But then I would just say reboot your phone.
Yeah, like you said, the system, adjusts all of that. If it becomes
Yeah.
too much, it knows which ones to dump off. And so, really, there's no need. I never close my apps. And frankly, when you do that, your apps launch really fast. But, you like, Marcus says, it's like turning off a car. How long are you going to be doing that? It's just, it takes it longer to start an app
Well, the other
when
thing
you close it
also
off.
is that, especially with Android 10, it is good enough and knows how long an app has been active for, and it will actually put it to sleep anyway. It's going to put
Yes.
it way down in
Yeah.
the background there. So closing it's not going to make any difference. In fact, some apps that you close don't automatically go into the background anyway.
No.
They will still
Yep.
sit there. If you look at your background processes, they're still sitting there probably for another hour or two before your phone comes along and says, oh, you haven't used this app for a while, so we better put it to sleep now.
And to check out our theory, if you want to prove us wrong or right, just clear an app or launch an app that is already running in the background and see how fast it is, and then go clear that off and launch it, and you see that it takes longer to launch that app. So it's kind of wasting your battery, and just it's no bueno.
Now, the other thing, obviously, as well, Nimmer, whilst we're talking about these apps, a lot of these apps claim to do many, many things. So you look at some of these apps and they say that they can probably do half a dozen different things, optimize your battery, CPU cooling, which I've still got to work out what the hell that means, really, but,
You don't need a lot of
unused
this
apps.
stuff. A lot of these things
You
do
don't
nothing.
need it.
No,
They don't
these
really
things
do
do
any,
nothing.
I don't think they do very much at all, to be honest. And
No.
if you go through some of these apps and you click on, I don't know, let's say close down background apps, and they've probably got, let's say they've got 10 apps. Now, they might have the most 10 apps, recent apps that you've used. Now, you've already closed those, and this does prove the theory correct. You've probably closed those out of your app switcher or your recent apps. But
Yep.
they're still effectively running in the background. Now, you click on that thing to close the apps. I would almost be willing to bet that if you went straight out of that app and went straight back into it again, probably half of those, if not more, would reappear anyway.
Yep.
So is it actually closing them down? Probably not. It's hard to say unless you really delved right into the system, but I don't know. I think a lot of these things are pretty unnecessary. I mean, for me, all I really want is something that's going to clear my cache and going to clear my junk files. That's
Yep.
really all I want.
Now, do you
essentially.
guys ever reboot your phones?
Of course.
I don't do unless something happens. Frankly, like yesterday, for instance, I let my phone. It was like at 1%, so I just let it die. I try to do that maybe like once
Well, that's
a month or
essentially gonna
maybe
reboot
twice.
your phone. Yeah.
Once every 2 months. But I never turn off my phone unless I forget the battery and it runs down or something like that.
See, I would
Or else I
reboot a
never
lot
do.
more often than that. I wouldn't reboot every day, but I definitely reboot
Yeah, no, I don't do that.
a couple of times a week.
Yeah, so I would definitely say, you know what, you should reboot probably once a week, maybe twice a week, once a week for sure. Just to get stuff out of memory, just to get your phone back running. You know, if you're running your phone, it starts being a little sluggish, something's not working right, this is happening, just give it a reboot. See what happens. Usually, a lot of times, it might actually help fix whatever the issue is.
Yeah, and like I
So
said, if you
just give
could
it a
let the
reboot.
battery run out, sometimes to recalibrate. I do mine like once a month. I let it run all the way down.
Now you don't need to do that. So that's the other thing I was going to talk about is battery. With the batteries in the phones now, you actually do not need to do any kind of recalibrations or this or that to them. Actually, if you want your battery to work most optimally, the top best performance out of your battery, what you're going to do is you're going to charge it to 85%. You're going to unplug your phone. You're going to use your phone. You're going to discharge it. And as soon as it gets to 15%, you're going to plug it back in. Now, who the hell does that?
Well, I let my
Nobody
battery,
does that.
I charge mine. I never let my battery go over 84, 87, unless I forget it, or else when it's like 80 something or even sometimes 78, I unplug my phone.
The most
I don't,
important
Well, you're
thing
better
is
than me,
that-
Warren, because
yeah.
I just I plug
yeah,
it in, I
don't-
leave
yeah.
it plugged in.
Yeah,
I
so
don't do
I.
that. I don't like leaving my phone. Like people leave
The
phones
most
overnight.
important thing out
I
of this
never do that.
conversation, though, is especially for the current lot of batteries, is you actually don't need to let it go all the way down. Unlike the former batteries, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact terms of what sort of batteries, nickel metal hydride or whatever the bloody things were called, but with those you had to discharge completely and then charge up. With these, you're actually better, like Nima said, to actually only charge it down about 20, 15%, somewhere around there, and then
Yeah, and
boost it
this
up
is something that
typically.
all
Yeah.
the experts would say, oh, do this and that. But for me, I don't want to charge my battery up to 100%. It's just that's too much.
Well, as
Just-
Nima said, you're better than me. Once I chuck it on the charger, I'm not going to sit there and monitor the fact that it's going to be at 85%. I don't think I've ever done that in my life. But,
I haven't either.
Yeah.
I mean, like I saad, if you really want to optimize it, you want to last the longest, then that's exactly what you do. You save it, you watch it. As soon as it hits 85, you unplug it. 80, 85, you unplug it. Then you let it drain. As soon as it hits 15, you plug it back in, charge it up again. No one has time for that. So don't bother doing anything with it. Charge it up to
Only I do
100%. Let it sit there. I don't know anybody who does that. That's good if that you do that. But
Yeah.
you know what? If you're charging it, you're letting it sit there overnight, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Your battery's going to last probably 2 years no matter what you do anyway. By about the time you hit 2 years, you're going to start
It's time to get a
noticing
new
that
phone.
that thing is going to start losing battery. You can probably get your battery replaced if you'd like to get another year or two out of your phone. Otherwise, just replace the damn thing. But I would say to you, once you hit 2 years, if you're starting to notice that it's draining less, there's nothing that you really could have done that was going to make it charge, last longer. Other than the one thing that you can do is make sure your phone does not get hot,
yes.
because heat kills components and heat
Oh,
kills
especially
batteries.
with the battery. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
and heat-
please do
heat
not
is-
leave your phone in your car. Do not, let it sit out in the sun.
Well, the other thing that heat does, of course, is bloats.
It does.
the
It'll
battery.
expand
So
the battery.
That's the last thing you want to have happen in your phone, because if that happens,
Yeah.
it's off to the repair shop it goes for.
It's actually what some of the Pixel 4s are experiencing at the moment. So if you have a Pixel 4 and you're starting to notice the battery's expanding, the back of your phone is warping, coming off.
Oh, that brings back memories of
Yeah.
the Samsung
the-
S7.
the peeling
Oh,
baby.
Happy days of the blow up in the plane or something, wasn't it?
That was the Note 7, yes.
Was that the Note 7?
Yes.
Yeah, that was the Note 7.
So, you
Good
don't have
fun,
to
though.
do that much with batteries at this point. Just make sure don't get them too hot. If you really want them to last a long time, do what Warren does. But other than that, do not let them discharge all the way. It's just not good for them to do that. It's
If
not.
you can avoid it, yeah.
If you can avoid it,
Yeah.
don't let them discharge completely. It's fine if you do, but try not to do that too often.
And let's face it, a lot of people, I'm not saying everyone, but a lot of people, by the time that happens with your battery, your phone's probably going to be 2 years old, possibly 3 years. You're probably going to be looking at getting a new phone anyway.
Right.
Let's face it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So talking about, cleaners, Nimmer, I just use
Well,
the
before
simple.
before we get to the cleaners, though, I want to touch on one more subject here, on whether or not we should do this or not do this, and then we'll talk about how to actually optimize the phone real quick. So sorry to interrupt you, but security apps. Security apps are one of those
Oh
things
my
that
gosh. Yeah.
people are going to be divisive about day and night, and they're going to argue about day and night. And I think we're going to get into a little bit of an argument here. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see if we actually agree.
Put me on the other side. I don't use those, so put
So-
me down there.
So security apps are one of those things that they have two sides to the same coin. One side is you want to be protected, obviously, so you want to use a security app. Well, the more permissions that you grant a security app, the more holes you're opening up in your system, the more likely it is that your phone is going to get compromised, possibly by a hole in that security app that you just ran, that you just opened up a bunch of holes in your system to do. Also, Google Play Protect has, does scan your apps and such for security threats. On the other hand, the other side of that is, well, you want to be protected. Google Play Protect clearly isn't all that great, seeing as we're always hearing about every other week about how some new apps are found on the Play Store to be malicious and this and that. What is a user to do? Well, in my view, it's up to you.
well, that's great advice. Thank you very much, Nimmy. You took a whole 2 minutes to get to that point.
I did.
Jeez.
It is up
okay.
to you whether or not, and I'm sure Marco will cut some of this out, and maybe not, but you know what, I'll tell you
I
what.
won't. Look, I would 100% agree. There's no argument. I think if you're going to use a security app, you've really got to think about which one you want to go for. I mean, it's like anything. There's so many out there. They all claim to do the same thing. To be fair, though, Nemo, you did recommend a security app, which I think is very important that we actually put in the show notes, because it's about
Yes.
the only one that I like
Yeah.
and that I would trust.
The one that I like, and I use this on my computer, I use this on my phone, I use this on everything that I have, and the reason that I use it, it's trusted by businesses. It actually started out as corporate only, and eventually rolled down to the consumer, but they're very, very highly rated just about anywhere they are, and that would be Sophos. Now, your phone will probably come with mobile security from your carrier. That's usually they're using something, I don't know, some of the same providers. I don't like a lot of that stuff, and I don't want my carrier involved with that, so I just turn that stuff off. But I do use Sophos, and I find that it works well. Now, if you start getting too many alerts about low reputation apps or whatever, it starts to annoy you. You can always shut that off. You don't need to, you don't need to run that. But I can tell you that Sophos does a really great job of making sure that your device doesn't have any kind of threats on there. It scans for privacy stuff. It scans for any app that doesn't have good ratings on the Play Store. A number of things that it does.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's an app that I definitely recommend if you're going to use a security app. And I guess, like I said, it's kind of up to you whether or not you use one. And I can see both sides personally. I went the longest time without using it.
I've used other security apps on my mobile. I've tried AVG. I've tried Kaspersky, which I actually recommend very highly for Windows use. Kaspersky's excellent, but
Yeah.
just not the same on the mobile. It's okay. It does an okay job. If you look at reviews, they pretty much say the same. But Sophos
Kaspersky is
very
also
good.
not really accessible on the Windows side
No.
either.
Not these
and
days,
that's
no.
and that's the one thing that Sophos is. Kind of. Sophos is a web-based. Sophos, you can manage everything through a web-based client that is very accessible. The program itself that you install on your computer is absolutely useless, but you never need to interact with it. And that's the thing. There's nothing that you can't do using the web interface. And so if you're looking for something accessible, I would definitely check out Sophos, and install that, and use that. I think it does a great job. And if you're one of those that decides you just don't need one, that's fine. You probably don't. I'm not going to tell you that you do. So,
Oh, look, I think the Play Store does a reasonable enough job. If you want to be, I guess, the thing about Sophos is it will warn you, and it can get annoying. It will warn you about what they call low reputation apps. So as Nima said, you can turn that off. But I think out of all the ones that I've looked at, it's probably the most reliable, and it seems to come up with probably the best results, I think.
yes.
And
Yep.
like we say, always try to not be side loading stuff that you don't know where they're coming from. I don't know. Well, it's just maybe my personal preference, but I just never
No.
happen to be one of those, go happy side loading apps.
It
And,
depends on what I'm side
I
loading. If I'm
just
side loading an
don't
app that I
do
know
it.
is reputable, like for example, if I want to side load the BBC app, then I will do it. And if I
Yeah.
run it through Sophos and it says that it's clean, which it always does, then I will run with it.
But
you've
that's
got
where
to,
having that security app is important
Correct.
too. Make sure
that's
you
where
scan
the
that
security
stuff.
is good. Because if you
Yeah.
are a person, and it's not always an option that you have, Warren. Some people that live over, in parts of the world where, certain apps that they want to get aren't available in the Play Store. There's plenty of places over in the subcontinent where they can't just get generic apps,
Yeah.
where they have to sideload. So I think
Yeah.
a security measure like Sophos, which is free, by the way, on the mobile, you don't have to pay for it. So can't really ask for much more. And it does a damn good job. Plus, it's completely accessible. There is not
Yes.
one part of that app that's not accessible.
Yeah.
So,
Well, there you go.
yeah.
So if you're
there's a
concerned about
recommendation.
your whatever security, you could go grab that and be a happy camper.
One
And of
thing
course,
about
we'll put it
side
up in
loading.
the show notes. Of
Yeah,
course,
we'll put that
this
up in the show notes. The other thing I'm going to put up in the show notes is something, the Google Protect program. I'm going to put that up for anybody who's concerned about, side loading, things like. Well, that's one of the things that it blocks is ability to side load apps. You can set up your Gmail account with this Google protection. I don't remember exactly what the name of this thing is, but one of the things that it'll do, it'll require you to have two-factor authentication through security key. Your phone can be the security key, but it does require that, which is you definitely should if you don't. And the other thing it'll do is it'll block side loading apps. It does some other things too, but I definitely recommend using that if you're able to. Maybe we'll put that in the show notes, but that's not just an Android thing only. That'll secure your Google
And
account.
another part of the security whole spectrum, which I've just been thinking about and have used for quite a while now, is if you're typing in, and I know of a lot of people that still do this, they will type their passwords and they will rely on Google to remember them. Now, I don't really like relying on anybody to remember my passwords, so I use something like LastPass. I would
Yes, a
highly
password
recommend
manager is excellent.
that you look at a password manager. Do not rely on, well, if you want to be security
Well,
conscious,
but
do
that
not
you're,
rely
you're
on Google
allowing
to
someone
remember
to
stuff like that.
remember. If you're letting LastPass remember your password, it's the same thing as letting Google do your autofill
Nah,
passwords.
but LastPass has got a very good reputation at doing this. They've been doing it for
Yeah,
a long
but
time.
it's still someone remembering your password. So I don't
I'm
necessarily
It
talking
see
depends
the
on
difference.
if it depends on if you choose to have it uploading to the cloud or not. But one thing about LastPass and these 1Password is these are actually dedicated password managers,
Yeah.
as opposed to having passwords just sitting there in your browser. So I actually agree on this one with Marco that you definitely want to use, if possible, to use a third party password manager. If
You
you'd
should
like to
never have
rely on
something
Google,
sitting in your
that's fine.
browser.
But
Yeah.
the one thing that really annoys me about the Chrome one, is it's unfortunate. Some websites you go to, you try to generate a password, for example, it will not generate that password. So then you end up invariably typing in something which you definitely shouldn't do. I mean, the idea is that you don't know any of your passwords.
If you want to be
other
completely
than your
security
master
conscious, you
password.
shouldn't. No, that's right.
Right.
And that's why. And that's the other thing about the one I use is LastPass, but it's not cloud-based, Warren. Like it's completely run within
Well, it
No,
can be cloud-based. It
no,
certainly
it
can
can
be.
be cloud-based.
It can be, but-
It's the same thing with, Dash or,
No,
they're
but
all
They
what I'm
can
saying
be,
is
but it
you-
depends on
you-
how you
you-
configure them.
You
So,
configure it. You don't make it cloud-based. Well, I certainly wouldn't, but yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I've been trying to use this one called My Key.
sure.
I kind of like it, but
Yeah.
There's,
plenty
KeyPass is
around.
another one that
Yeah.
does well, and there are some third-party KeyPass clients on Android and PC and all the.
I mean, I personally
there's a number
use
of these,
LastPass
so-
because it's been around for a long time. It's
Yeah.
reputable. It's easy to use, and it's been well known to do the right thing. They very well. I don't think I've ever seen anything come up bad with them. So
Yeah.
it's about reputation for me. You've got to go with whatever And it's the same in the terms of, for me anyway. If you go with Google, and I know Nimmer and I were talking about this, Google have always had a reasonably good reputation. In terms of whether you go with them for Gmail, etc., etc., Google's got a reputation to protect.
Yeah.
So
I think the good thing is that, we have all of these choices there. If you don't like one particular one, give another one a try and until you find the one that you really like. And I think the one feature that I like with Google is, it checks your passwords, on the other different sites or whatever, and you find something and say, hey, maybe this
Yeah, a bunch of
password,
these password managers do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
some of them
they
actually
all
will
do
go out
that.
to the dark web and check that too. So,
So,
all right. Well, let's demonstrate. I'm going to talk a little bit about cleaning of stuff and what do you need to clean. How do you go about cleaning it? One of there's a couple of terms. One of them is cache. I'm going to talk a little bit about what a cache is. C-A-C-H-E. Cache, as Marco says it in Ausland.
cache.
Yes. So what is
Not
that?
Quiche, cache.
All right. Not quiche. Okay.
no,
All right.
no, cache.
So what is this cache? Well, every time that you run a program, every time that you download something or whatever, it's stored temporarily somewhere. Some files are stored temporarily somewhere, whether it's something that the program temporarily needed to download to run something, a file that when you load a web page, some temporary part of that web page is loaded. If you download a file, temporary place that it's stored before it moves to your downloads folder. There's a lot of examples of this. There's also program data or app data. And what does that mean? Something like Acapella. When you open up Acapella and you download all the voices, those voices take up storage. Or, for example, if Google Music, you have Google Play Music, one of the settings in there, and I think it does it by default, when you play music and you're connected to Wi-Fi, it'll automatically download stuff. Or Facebook is really known for caching things and storing things. So the end result is you might have downloaded an app and it might have been 100 megs, not 100 gigs, wow. 100 megs, 200 megs, and then you look at it a month later, 2 months later, and all of a sudden this thing is 2 gigs. So that stuff you definitely want to get rid of. If nothing else, then it helps the app load a little bit quicker. It also will clear out needed storage on your phone. So that's one way to optimize your phone. I think probably one of the best ways to optimize your phone. How do we do that? If you have a Samsung device, there's and an LG device, and maybe some other devices, although I haven't ran into it, certainly on LG, certainly on Samsung. If you go into the settings, and I'm actually going to do this right now on the Samsung device that I have. Maybe I'm not. Uh-oh. What's going on with this phone?
Be up a little bit.
I have to unlock this phone. All right, so
Somebody forgot to put their phone on Do Not Disturb, I think.
yes, thank you, Marco. So let's go to settings. And in the settings, I can always search for it, but I'm going to go to exactly the menu and I'll tell you what it's called. Let's go through the settings here. Device care. There we go. Let's go to device care. If you go to device care, it says that my phone is at 90% optimization level, and I don't know how it determines this. I can't say I've ever seen it go lower than 90, but who knows, maybe it does. It will close background apps and run checks, whatever that means. It also has my battery time, and it tells me how much I have left, 11 hours, 43 minutes. 64.7 gigs out of 128 gigs. 7.4 gigs out of 12 gigs. And if I hit that Optimize Now button, what it's going to do is clear out some of those running apps, clear out some of those running processes, and my RAM will probably drop down to about 3 or 4 gigs instead of the 7.4 gigs. So if you have that kind of an app, the LG one goes a bit further and actually does clean out some of the cache files, and it'll actually tell you after every clean how much of that storage you've managed to erase and how much storage you managed to free up using their version of device care, device management, whatever theirs is called. So this is a setting that's available on some phones. Now, if you have any phone, you can get the Google Files app, and Austin Pinto actually put this in here in the chat. Here we go. He says Google Files is a good app to clean the phone. Yes, I agree. No, there's no similar option on Pixels. Sorry, Gary. Okay. So, here we go. What we're going to do is in the Files app, there are 3 tabs along the bottom. Clean, Browse, and Share. The one we want is Clean, unless we actually want to browse files. So it shows here 60.01 gigs used, 128 gigs total. Junk files, I can free up to 360 megs. I can free up duplicate files. I can allow it to free up more files. I can free up large files and review what those files are before I clean them. Apparently I have 2.47 gigs of large files on my device. Probably random recordings that I've done.
I was going to say they're probably recordings.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and do this junk files. If nothing else, I'll get rid of 363 megs. So I'm going to double tap on this. System and app files that build up over time. I can see them if I want, but I know I want to get rid of them. So I'm going to hit clean, deleting.
And the deleting is really fast. That's what I like about the Google Files.
Junk files cleaned. There we go. And it does repeat deleting until it's done deleting. But I've just freed up 363 megs of junk files on my device.
Well, you're not going to get any disagreement from me. I think Google Files is one of the better ones out there. That's for sure.
So if I look at the storage, it actually says now 59.64 gigs used out of 128 gigs. So it does its job. It works well.
And Google keeps improving files, and that's what I use as my default. Funny it started for, very low profile phones, and now, everybody uses files, just about everybody, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I actually also really like that, and of course I've got a Samsung as well, Nima, but I do like that device care. It's actually the way that works is pretty cool. And,
yeah.
It'd be nice
it does
if the
work
Pixels
well.
actually offered that as well in other phones. It's actually quite a cool way to do it too.
The other app that I'm going to talk a little bit very briefly about, Austin, you asked this question. How do you tell if your battery's optimized? One way you can do this, in most phones you can go under settings, go under about, and go under battery info, something like that. You should have the ability to see if your battery, what the amperage is of that battery. So it should show you whether it's full or whatever that would be. So for example, Go to settings. Let's go to about phone. Battery information. 4,500 milliamps typical. Now, I would expect that to get lower over the years, and so you would know, it'll probably say, it's not typical or needs help or whatever the messaging is over time. So far I've got a good battery, and that's exactly what I like to see. So something like this, you can definitely do this. The other app that I wanted to mention, I will put it in the show notes, is an app called Android Hidden Settings. Because Android Hidden Settings has a lot of modes that you cannot access in any other way. Open Android Hidden Settings.
Opening Android Hidden Settings.
Here we go. Okay. Notification log settings. So I can actually see a full log of all the notifications even if I've cleared them. You can do this in a lot of these things you can do in a different way. However, Android Hidden Settings brings all of these to the table, and not all of these settings will work on every device. Some of these are locked down by carriers, so it's just something that you're going to have to download the app and see what works for you and what does not work for you. Wi-Fi information, hardware testing, so you can test out your display and all these things, make sure everything's working, your speaker. Battery optimization settings. Some of these you can only get by using dialer codes, and if you don't know what dialer codes are, most phones have a certain code that you can dial into the dialer pad to get into hidden areas of your phone. Easter egg, phone info, developer option, font type. So there's a lot of settings in here. Band mode, and some of these will say risky. So, if you get into it and you change something,
sweet.
that's kind of up to you.
Yeah, you can literally render your phone completely useless.
Well, they're limited by what your phone and what your carrier lets you do, but yes. Confirm lock password. Some of these are duplicate, and they only, one will work on one phone and another will work on the other phone. It's just literally every place that you can find a hidden setting on your Android phone. This app has that.
This is a very cluttered screen.
It is.
Interesting.
It's a cluttered screen, but it has
very cluttered.
Really anything that you could possibly want
pretty
to get
much.
into.
If you're somebody that likes playing around with settings and you complain for years like I have, why do they not give us this setting? Well, you could pretty much get any setting off that app.
You have to be sure you know what you're doing. You don't want to...
Well, I'm sure there's plenty of people that think they know what they're doing. Whether they know what they're doing or not is...
Well, and the carriers will lock out some of the really important stuff, and the manufacturers won't let you do anything that'll completely let you brick your device unless you root. So there's there's going to be limitations of what you can actually do. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
I reckon there's been some really handy tips there, and probably apps that people haven't heard about, especially with that Android. What was that last app called?
Android Hidden Settings. Yep.
Android Hidden Settings. That's a good one. I do like that.
So put that in the show notes. If it's an app, people may want to try it or give it a little try and see what it is.
There's that 3D toolbox or whatever. I don't know if you want to talk briefly about that, Marco, before we move on to listener emails.
Again, that's another one. I mean, there's plenty of these sorts of apps out there. And the other one that you might want to also mention, Nimmer, as well, is CCleaner. That does a reasonable enough job, I guess. I still don't think it's as good on the mobile, though, as it is on a PC.
Yeah, no, I mean, it does let you clean out some stuff, but I don't.
It's all right. But look, the 3C, I think it's called 3C Toolbox, and we'll look that. We might throw that one in the show notes as well, because that's probably the most well-known toolbox out there in terms of being able to optimize your battery, being able to, what else does it do? CPU cooler, whatever that means. You can clean files there. So
it's got a lot of these settings that we've talked about. So
it's got a lot of the settings all put into one. So I guess that's another one that you can look at that does do a lot of this sort of stuff. But look, it's a good app. It's a decent enough app, and it does what it's supposed to do, I guess, reasonably well.
Let's move to emails.
Okay, let's go to listener emails. I think
This is my favorite part of the show.
we've done some
thank you very
tips,
much.
we've done some news,
Yeah.
we've done some apps. Let's go to listener emails. I'm going to open them up here.
And again, I'm going to ask people because, and we mentioned this in last week's show as well, Nimmer and Warren, but it'd be really, really cool if we actually got a voice email or voice attachment so we can put it on the show one day. I reckon that'd be cool. We actually really enjoy hearing from our listeners, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah,
in
if
all
you want to
sorts of
create a
ways.
recording for us, if
Yeah,
you even
that'd
want to
be cool.
pop in live, let us know, or if you want to, whatever. So
We'd love hearing from you.
we have a email here from Dennis Long. He sent this last week. Thank you for listening to the email, to the podcast, Dennis. He says, let's talk about podcast apps. I loved Weather Timelines. Sadly, that one appears dead. What is just as good? Now, I've never used Weather Timeline.
No.
The one that I tend to use is something, I use AccuWeather, or to be honest, I just use the Google, whatever comes on my phone. That just, you pull up the Google feed and you can ask the Google Assistant what's the weather. And I don't bother around with a lot of these apps. I used to use a Dark Sky. I also used to use Storm Shield. I don't pay for either one now since they're both pretty much dead. And Dark Sky especially got bought out by Apple. And they're killing off the Android side.
Yeah.
There are a lot of these
And
weather
yet
channels.
we give them everything from the Android side of things. Doesn't that piss you off?
Yeah, it's rather unfortunate.
Yeah. And that used to be quite a good app, actually. That was a decent app back in the
Yeah,
day. But,
yeah, it did.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of these apps. Some of them have ads. Some of them you have to pay for to get rid of the ads if you want that. And I do recommend that you do because it'll make the app a lot less
Support your
cluttered.
devs.
Support the developers.
Yeah.
Some of them are they charge you like $2.99 a month or something. I wouldn't honestly pay for a weather app like that, but they do exist. You know what? Play with them and let us know what your favorite is. That's what I can say. Like I said, I recommend the AccuWeather. That seems to be pretty well laid out. It received an update a couple of weeks ago.
And I'll
Yeah.
throw
Major
a couple
revamp.
out there as well. I'm not sure if they'd be available in the States, but the two that there's one that I use called Willy Weather. Bit of an odd name, but I suppose it works pretty well. Seems to be the most accurate for me anyway, because it does have other, what do they call them, where,
Like sources.
measures the temperature, but it has it seems to do it from my local area, which a lot of these apps seem to be miles away, like they're literally 20 miles away, which would affect things a bit, I guess.
Yeah.
And the only other one that I would probably use would be Weather Zone. And again, I'm not 100% sure if that's available on Android. I know it's available. I used to use it when I was an iPhone user, and that one works pretty well. But these days, for me, I just use Willy Weather, or I just go, HG, what's the temperature outside, and that tends to work pretty well for me, to be perfectly honest. That's
Yeah. Or I just walk outside and
Yeah.
figure out what's the weather. I mean, honestly,
that's
I don't know.
good now. I'm not crazy about weather apps anymore.
I mean, look, if the thing's 1 degree off, I really couldn't care less. If it
Right.
says it's 40 degrees and it's 39, well, it's still damn cold for me. So whatever. But those would be
Then
my
I'm going to
ones.
read a little bit longer of an email here from Gary, and you guys can cut me off when we're done here, but I'm going to read this email from Gary, and we'll have a little discussion on that. And then I forgot we were going to talk about Right Here briefly, and then we'll wrap this podcast up. So let's read an email here from Gary. Hello. I wonder, in these uncertain times, OEMS give limited OS support. Should they not be giving longer support? If we are comparing the side of the fence, if the 2016 iDevice can get a good amount of support and OS support, as long as the device hardware specs can support the OS update cycle, should Android not be accomplishing the similar goal? Since the new strategy for Android is privacy and security, should not also apply to these devices, which with 2016 and beyond specs can run the OS updates for 5 years if an average person can install a Windows 10 ISO, should they not be able to install an Android generic system image to keep their device secure, up to date? These are my questions for discussion for tonight. Okay.
Well, I'll jump in here, Nimmer, and say, okay, fair enough. The iOS devices, iPhones, etc., you're probably going to get 5 years out of those. I know for a fact that Samsung are now giving you 3 years worth of what do they call it? OS updates and 4 years for the security,
patches. Yep.
which I think is more than reasonable. I know for a fact, and I actually read this during the week, that the OnePluses are only giving you 2 years and 3 years respectively, and I think a lot of the other manufacturers are probably 2 and 3, although I think LG's 3 now, isn't it, Nimmer? I'm not
LG's
100%
very
sure
slow
on
with
that one.
updates, so who knows what they're
They're
going to do.
slow with their updates anyway, but I
Yeah,
think if,
I
you,
think
if,
Samsung
if
has
a
really come a
manufacturer
long
gives
way.
you 3 years and they give you 4
Yeah.
years in security, I think that's pretty
And
reasonable.
I believe
think they
Google
should
gives
all
you
do that.
3 and 3, so
Yeah, and frankly, we tend to give Samsung a bad rap, but for some reason people tend to. But when you look at the OS updates, I think they're the major ones now
Yeah.
that are really doing the OS updates. And
Well,
most
I honestly
especially
think
that's to be
Samsung
said.
over the last year. I honestly think Samsung over the last year have really improved. I mean, I literally get my updates, if not the same day as the Pixels, maybe a week later.
No,
at the very
even
most.
earlier than the Pixels get the security patches. Samsung pushes theirs
I
out
think
before
that's right.
Google.
depending on where you're at, yeah.
Depending on where
Well, I
you're
think
at,
one
but-
of the things is to think about too is which device that you get, because the mid-range devices are definitely not updated as frequently,
No.
and so it
Forget
just
about
depends.
Forget about Motorola.
Yeah, it just very, very much depends on how much you spend on a phone, and it shouldn't,
Yeah.
but it does. I agree with you, Gary. I think we talked about this before. I think the manufacturer should update more.
Yeah.
As for generic system images, it's kind of up to the manufacturer, each manufacturer, because there are so many different skins, all this stuff, and hardware, and screen types, and screen sizes, so many different things. Google does provide generic system images that you can install on some devices. If you install it on your device and it works, cool. If it breaks, congratulations. So it just is what it is. But yeah, like if you want to install a generic system image on a Pixel, for example, you could. The one thing about generic system images to note is if you do this, one of the issues that you're going to run into is you're not going to get accessibility out of the box because they don't have a lot of the Google apps installed. It's a very bare bones
Bare
image.
bones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that includes, unfortunately, and I don't think it should be this way, but it also includes things like TalkBack.
Yeah.
So you will not get TalkBack on a generic system image unless you have to install it later on you have to get it
Yeah,
from
but
ADB.
you still got to get
and-
from point A to point B without. Yeah.
yeah, I
without
mean, you might have to
anything,
install
so-
it through ADB or something. You also want to install Google Text-to-Speech. That's another thing that's missing. So, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. The last
So
thing we're going to...
if you're partially sighted, you'll be okay. But if you're totally blind, could be difficult.
It could be, yeah, unless you're familiar with ADB and you have the required setup. So you have the required TalkBack and Google Text-to-Speech.
You'd have to make sure that you have everything on,
Yeah.
at hand, and that it's the correct version and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
The last thing I'm going to talk about is right here. It seems like they're having an event to discuss their 3.0 launch. That should have been probably talked about in the news, but I forgot.
Yes, I just remembered as well.
They're going
I
to have a
that thing
3.
on my phone.
They're going to have a launch event to discuss the 3.0 launch of right here. Apparently, there are some people with NFB that are going to be there, and a bunch of they have a few really high level people quoted as really thinking the app is great and all that. Now, I've tried this app, and I'm going to go to the event, and I'm just going to spare you a little bit of hassle. If you try to run this app, it actually is not very good, frankly. It's not very good. One of the things that it does do is if you point your phone, it will tell you what's around in the direction that you point your phone, as long as you have your compass calibrated. Now, that part actually seems to be okay. The problem is when you start walking, it announces either the wrong location or nothing at all. And that's not very helpful. The other thing is that it makes it... biggest thing about right here, right, HEAR, biggest thing about it is that it supposedly does indoor navigation. When I look at the list of places that are available for indoor navigation, no, there are very, very few out there.
They were
The
1,000
closest
miles
one to
from
me are something like San Diego. Most of them are blindness centers, which I'm not really quite sure why you would need indoor navigation at a blindness center, since you have mobility instructors and all that can help you get around, and it is a blindness center, so they should be accessible and have braille
To
and all
be
that anyway. But
independent, Nimmer.
okay, but it's a blindness center. I mean, I would want it. I would want this at a mall, at an airport, at a hotel, and to be fair, there are some of these. I think mostly in Israel. There are some of these, so there's a few hotels, but even there, it's not very many places, and it's only, I think, in Tel Aviv.
In all honesty, though, Nimmer, I think if I was, and I've tried this app as well, and I'm actually going to go to this, even though it's at 3 o'clock in the morning my time, I'm actually going to bother attending this one. But I think out of any of these sorts of apps, honestly, like this app is not a patch on Lazarillo, for example.
No, it's just not very good.
Does the same thing. It's just not a patch on it. I don't know why there's so much hoo-ha over this right here or whatever it's called. It's just not. I know I've walked around with this thing. It doesn't, and obviously it's not been optimized for down here yet in Melbourne, but it does not read anything out. It's completely useless. I mean, you might.
Well, I was walking and it was actually reading stuff out that was like 3 blocks away, and it was saying actually, when I was moving, it wasn't even saying I was moving. It kept saying I was in the same location.
That's exactly the issue I have with it. So.
The other thing that it does is when you look at your location accuracy, it brought me down to maybe 20 or 27 meters. I know for a fact that I have a lot more accuracy than that with a lot of apps, including Nearby Explorer or something.
Nearby Explorer, Lazarillo, I can get down to about 10 meters.
Yeah,
it's just crazy. So
I haven't used that app in quite a while. You know, frankly, I think the last time I checked on that app,
the only one that I used was the
over
2.0. I haven't actually tried 3.0, so I should reserve judgment on that. But
I mean, the best feature I think is just around me that you can hit that button, and as soon as you move your phone, depending on what direction you have it pointed in, it will actually tell you any businesses or streets. But it is very limited in what it does say. And the other thing is you have to calibrate it. You have to calibrate the compass for it to actually work. It does have a decent compass. It'll say, if you hit direction, it'll say north or south. You do have to calibrate it. The calibration is somewhat accessible. It tells you to shake your phone and move it up and down and left and right. It doesn't tell you how to do that or what way to do that. I finally managed to get it calibrated.
Yeah,
but it does beep until it is calibrated.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
At least that's helpful. It'll beep until it does get calibrated, but frankly, I don't recommend this app. Now, before we wrap up, we have some comments. Let me go through these.
But hang on, Nima, when is the event? Just in case someone wants
to. It's on Tuesday.
Join
at
it.
1 p.m. I believe, the 28th of.
Yeah, I believe on the 28th
July, whenever that is.
Yep.
At 1 p.m. Eastern, that is.
1 p.m. Eastern time.
Is that on Zoom
12 or 1?
Is that we can post a link for it or something?
Yeah,
you schedule. Actually, you have to go into that link, and if the registration is still open, you have to register, and then they will send you a Zoom link.
The registration as of this morning, my time, was still open, so we'll put a link in the show notes, and then it's up to you to pop onto that link and register.
Just in case someone wants to go
Yep.
there, but frankly, I don't care about it.
Well, I hope we get lots of users on there just to ask them questions.
Yeah, I want to ask them questions.
Yeah,
about
well,
it because
that's true.
It's supposed to be, an app that's going to change my life.
Yeah.
And it hasn't, to be honest. It really
no,
has
it
not.
hasn't.
So,
no, my favorite by far out of all of these is Nearby Explorer. But anyway.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
For weather app, Gary says he uses One Weather. It's very accessible. That's good. There's a GSI experience image called Pixel Experience that has all apps that come with a Pixel. That's good. Austin? Who let the dogs out? That's what Austin says.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. All I could hear was
my
the
dog.
dog.
Austin, that was my dog, and my apologies. I just let the damn dog into the house.
I think you should just open the gate.
I already did. I let her in, so she was just gonna keep barking out there, man, and I was getting upset about it.
Yeah.
Well, if you are still listening, it looks like we have 3 in the live. Please like this video, share it, subscribe to the channel. We are using a Anatad Podcast channel. We were on my personal YouTube. We have moved channels, so if you're not subscribed, please do subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you get the notifications and all that.
Ring Nimmer's bell. He likes
yeah.
it when you ring his bell.
No,
Yeah, please send your
Marco likes
friends
the bell.
to either the YouTube or if you're listening on Facebook or the AnatadPodcast.com. If you go there, AnatadPodcast.com, you can subscribe using your favorite podcatcher and download the episodes as well.
And I think the other important thing to mention, Nimmer, as you mentioned on the mailing list, which I know you're about to bring up, but let us know which would be, if you do like the live stream, if you don't like it, which method you'd like to tune in on, because I believe you're thinking of getting Periscope up and running.
Yeah, so we can do this on Twitter, so we can live stream that way.
So we like our listeners
YouTube,
to have the input.
we can do Facebook, whichever one you like. If you
or even if you want to live stream at all, if you don't want the live stream, you're just happy to download the
just do
podcast. And thank you to everyone, by the way, for downloading. We've had a lot of downloads, which is
we have. I think we had 100 listeners or something just on the last cast. So. All right, so we'll wrap it up here. Now, if you would like to subscribe to the mailing list, Anatad plus subscribe at googlegroups.com. That is our email list where we discuss Android apps, news, talk
and deals, baby.
All kinds of stuff. So you can subscribe to that. If you'd like to send us an email, a demo, anything like that, anatadpodcast@gmail.com. And thank you guys for listening, and we will see you all next week.
Thank you, and bon voyage from down under.
Thank you, guys. Have a great week. Or actually, a weekend, whatever. We'll see you next time.